Spandau recollection was like David Jensen, dear old kid Jensen, got me tickets to see David Bowie years and years ago at the London Arena, which I think they've pulled down now. That bizarre hangar in the Docklands. And for some reason, I think it was when David was at Capitol, and for some reason the ticket that he gave me must have been from Spandau Ballet's allocation. Because when I got to the seat, Tony Hadley was sat next to me, and there was an empty seat the other side, and Martin Kemp came along and sat in that seat. And I'm thinking, so I just said, do you guys want to swap round? And Tony looked at Martin and said, no, you're all right. It's okay. So I just sat there like this for the whole gig.
Well, that was the shape of things to come, Nick.
Was that the Tin Machine gig?
No, it would have been the Outside tour, 95, I think.
Oh, because I went to see him at the Tin Machine gig there, and it was horrible. And I had a load of people in from Europe, and it was just, I mean, if ever you saw it and you liked it, I apologise, but it did nothing for me. I mean, he didn't do any song that I knew. And Adrian Belew was just on stage making noises the whole time. And he did the whole thing behind a gauze. And they front projected onto the gauze. So you might as well be watching.
No, that was Sound and Vision tour. That was Greatest Hits, that was.
No, this was the Tin Machine one. So he did that on Tin Machine as well. And anyway, I left at half time. And then it took me about 2 hours to get back to my car. Because where that place was, they had a park and ride thing to get you there. And it took about an hour waiting for the bus, and then because they weren't expecting anybody to leave at half time.
Yeah.
That place
they pulled it down. We did the Brits there a couple of years running because I think they got a good deal on it, but then it went back to Earl's Court after that.
Was the London Arena in the docks?
Yeah.
Oh, because I did a dreadful show with Jean-Michel Jarre there.
What, in the docks?
Outdoor spectacular.
In the pouring rain?
Yes.
Oh, Destination Dicklands.
We'd arranged some sponsorship for him, and I had the head of the airline who was the sponsor and everything else, and they had so many problems because they screwed up everything completely. And I remember standing with him, and they were insisting that I gave them this sponsorship money straight away. And I said, it's just not going to happen. There is no way I'm going to part with this money right now before the show. And the next thing I know, these 4 scaffolders turned up with shortened scaffold poles in their hands like this. And it was basically 50,000 quid or we ripped the lot down. And this was before the show went live. And I mean, it was just the most awful gig I think I've ever done in my life. Dreadful.
That sounds like the World Music Awards.
Yeah. I was sitting with Bruce Welch in the bleachers that were put together for that gig on the docks, and there was a whole load of well-known musicians all hiding under plastic sheeting because it was so wet. It was torrential. It was like an ice cold monsoon, and they were projecting onto the flour mills opposite, and the old derricks were all lit up and everything. But it was a very
there was no money, there was no budget, none of the suppliers have been paid, none of the sound, light, all of that. I mean, everybody was just traipsing around going, I haven't been paid. And they just carried on as if there was no problem at all. And I was amazed the gig actually happened. I really was, you know.
Yeah. Just a thought here. We're coming up to a couple of hours. I know it seems like 3 hours, but it's only been 2 hours. But I guess we have got homes to go to. But if I may just tell the assembled guys that Mo Foster's Bruce Welch story. Mo Foster, you may or may not know, the bass player, Jeff Beck's bass player, he doesn't say hello. He just says, have you heard the one about? And so he is one anecdote. And he's great mates with Bruce Welch. And Bruce Welch was going out with Olivia Newton-John all those years ago. And they split up. And Bruce Welch, in his grief, decided that he'd treat himself, get feeling better to some colonic irrigation. So Bruce Welch is there. I've had colonic irrigation, and it's just you put your legs up like that. It's like giving birth. While a normally very pretty lady sticks a pipe up your ass and starts sucking all this shit out. So there's Bruce Welch with his legs up in the air, with this pretty lady sucking all the shit out of him with a hose. And there's silence. And she looks at him and suddenly says, I've got all your records, you know. And there's Bruce Welch feeling very helpless, just doesn't know what to say. And he looks up and says, wonderful land. That was my favourite. I mean, it's just the whole picture of Bruce Welch with a pipe up his arse. And the way Mo tells it, you'll have to go on another one with Mo. His stories are absolutely amazing, but that absolutely really tickled.
And on that bombshell.
I think the Fuck Japan one is going to go down, John. I mean, that's brilliant, and the fact that it was Ozzy doing it as well. If it hadn't been for Ozzy, if it had been just another person, but the fact that he did it just makes it feel even better.
On that same night, what had happened is the crew had actually taken all the furniture out of Ozzy's room. Everything, the beds, they dismantled the wardrobe, they dismantled the chairs and the chests of drawers that were in his room, and put them all in one of the lifts. And the whole thing paled into insignificance when Rod had Fuck Japan on his forehead. So what would have been normally funny actually came a very, very long way down second place.
I remember Rick Wakeman told me once, I used to work with Rick on things, and he told me once about when Yes were on tour, they had a similar thing where they'd just do things in each other's dressing rooms every night, and it just got progressively more and more outrageous and ridiculous. Moving furniture, changing things around, putting a blow-up doll in there on the sofa or what have you. And then one night, I think the last night of the tour, all the crew and everyone kind of all clubbed together to play a gag on John Anderson. And when John went out on stage, they took everything out of the dressing room, they turfed it over with real grass, and they put a sheep in there, a real live sheep. He comes back afterwards and opens the door, and he's in the middle of a farm.
He's a funny geezer, Rick. He did a talk in we live in Lewis, and just outside Brighton. And he did a talk in the local, in one of the local churches. And Roger Dean was there. Roger Dean lives in Lewis as well. And Rick was saying that he was talking about. He said, "You might know that I've been married quite a few times." He said, and it was they all. I was never at fault for any of the divorces. In fact, he said, you wouldn't believe. But one of my wives divorced me because I wouldn't open the car door for her. He said, mind you, I just panicked and swam to the surface.
I don't know if you've heard Rick's story. I don't know if you've heard Rick's story about, because his book is fantastic. And he used to, when they was out on tour with Yes, he'd be in his sort of island of keyboards with his big cape on. And because analog synthesizers go out of tune all the time in different temperatures, he'd have a tech lying under the piano for the entire gig, who would come up and retune any of the synthesizers after he'd played a solo, and then duck back down again. And during the bits of Yes numbers where he would just be holding a chord for 15 minutes, he and the roadie would have a good old natter. And he said one of these gigs, he was nattering away to him, and the guy said, if you could order an Indian now, what would you order? And he went, a lambooner and a blah, 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 blah. And he came out with this long list of different things. And then he starts playing a solo again and goes on for about 15 minutes and looks down and the roadie's disappeared. And then he carries on playing. And then after about 20 minutes, this aroma starts coming up from under the piano. And the guy's gone off, bought exactly what he ordered, and is unpacking it all and putting it along the top of the piano with a plastic fork. So Rick, holding a chord with one hand, is eating away. as this curry wafts across the stage, and the rest of the band are all playing away, going, Rick in his spangly cape, jumping away on a naan bread.
And meanwhile, the dressing room's full of sheep.
Where the Lambuna came from.
Yeah, well, just very quickly, my curry rock star story. I think I've told it before. BBC Breakfast Time way back was live with cocaine snorting Frank Buff, God bless him. And I was doing the pop for years on there, and we were always on air at 10 to 7, and we'd have our guests, whoever it was, lined up, you know. So Frank would say, and here's Steve Blacknell, who have we got today? And lining up was Mick Hucknall and the drummer from Simply Red. And they'd been on the piss all night and on God knows what. And it turned out later they'd been for a late night curry. And they were so alert, if you know what I mean, when they came in. They seemed okay. So basically what had happened was, as they sat down, Mick Hucknall fell asleep. And started farting, literally like that, snoring, and this was live. And I actually turned around to Mick and said, Mick Hucknall, well, seems to be relaxed. Then talked to the drummer, and in the end, it was Mick Hucknall. Thank you very much, and good night. And you could see Frank Moff going, what the fuck? And in fact, I don't know whether I should say this because Frank is my God. I mean, he's dead now, but Frank had this thing. He was a very risky individual. And what he would do in the morning, well, at 11 minutes to 7, I'd be sitting with him and Selena and stuff, and he'd whisper in my ear, he said, okay, Frank, we've got 1 minute, Frank. You'd hear it there. Okay. And he'd turn around to me and he'd start talking about the stuff he'd done the night before, which was always sex, 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 and more sex. The language, I can't even repeat on this channel, was disgusting. And it was like, okay, Frank, we're coming to you in 10, 9, 8, and he'd always a 3, and it should right up like that. Turn to the camera, go, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Breakfast Time. Today we have the Nigerian president. And you could feel every time, he'd always end off with a C word, right on the bang. He loved it. And of course, he was the gallery's nightmare there. What's he going to say today? But he loved the riskiness of it. Just that one word, bang, and then saying, hello, Mr. Teddy Bear here, good morning. He loved it. But it taught me everything. It was brilliant, brilliant.
Wonderful.
I think that's it. Shall we call it a day? You happy, David? Is everything good?
Great stories. I think it's brilliant, guys. I think you've been really, really, really entertaining. I loved it.
Me too. I've enjoyed it. Really, really. Time's flown by.
Do us a favour, guys. If you like it, obviously share it amongst your friends.